Hi everyone, welcome to the Diversity in Libraries, the Stigma of Mental Illness session. Thank you for joining us. Um, we have a splendid speaker, Jacqueline Radebaugh, the Electronic Resources Librarian from the Florida International University. I would like to remind you, you can free to chat and share experience, but if you have questions to the speaker, please post that in the Q&A module so then we can capture all the questions easily. Jacqueline, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Let me share the screen. Does everyone see it?
Yes, I see it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Hi, my name is Jackie Radebaugh, and today I'd like to talk about diversity in libraries, the stigma of mental illness. I only have a few slides. What I thought would be better, in my opinion, whenever you're talking about things like mental illness, conversation is always powerful. So I'm hoping to, with my few slides, I'll go through them, and then maybe we can have a conversation afterwards. I'd first like to start off with a story of my friend Emily. Emily has been a professional librarian for over 20 years. During this time, she worked at the Library of Congress and 2 academic libraries. One academic library was small with 6 librarians, and the one where she is now has about 40 librarians. Emily enjoyed the smaller library because she was able to do many professional activities within the framework of her title. In the larger library where she now works, she has very precise guidelines of what she works on. She likes this because it gives her more time to do research and learn more about her professional assignments. But none of these jobs have been easy. Emily misses a lot of time off at work and struggles with her mental health almost daily. She has schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is a frightening diagnosis. Sometimes people call schizophrenics crazy. For Emily, she's a high-functioning schizophrenic. Although it has been hard keeping her jobs, she has done so and plans to continue to work until she retires. She hears voices and becomes paranoid sometimes. The voices come and go. Emily is on medication to keep them at bay, and she knows her triggers, so she tries hard to live a peaceful and non-stressful life. This is not always easy, and she finds that she goes to the hospital for help at least once per year. Emily does not disclose her diagnosis to anyone at work. Human Resources knows that she sees a psychiatrist. However, they do not disclose this to her supervisor. At Emily's previous position in the small academic library, she disclosed her diagnosis to 2 supervisors. The first one thanked her for the information, but did not do anything with it. After he retired, the next dean of libraries thanked her for the information and started the lengthy process of demoting Emily. He took away all of her supervisory responsibilities and began to give other people her job responsibilities. She spoke with Human Resources about this, and they told Emily that they could not help her. She also spoke with the head of the faculty senate, and they suggested that she speak to the provost. Emily even spoke to an attorney who told her that he could not help her until her pay was cut. At that point, Emily began to look for a new library to work in and pledged to herself that she would never disclose her diagnosis again. To disclose or not. Because of Emily's experience, she is very hesitant to disclose that she has a mental illness. She worries that her supervisor will slowly take away her duties like the library dean at her former university. However, disclosure would make things easier. Whenever Emily does not feel well, she must come up with an excuse without telling her supervisor that she is hearing voices and needs to go home to take her medication. Emily feels bad being mysterious about what is wrong with her. However, she does not want to lose her position. Types of disabilities. There are two types of disabilities, visible and invisible disabilities. In ALA's 2017 demographic study of the 38,000 members, 2.91% of the respondents answered yes to the question, do you have a disability? The Invisible Disability Association states, quote, an invisible disability is a physical, mental, or neurological disease that is not visible from the outside, yet can limit or challenge a person's movements, senses, or activities. Invisible disabled workers many times choose not to disclose their illness for fear of not being believed or experiencing repercussions from supervisors and coworkers, just like Emily. At one of the libraries where I worked, I hired someone with autism. She was a very good worker. However, library workers treated her like a child because of her differences. I remember being in a manager meeting with the dean and her supervisor, and they began to discuss where she should go in a reorganization. They asked everyone else what their preference would be, however, they never asked her. I brought this up to them, and they just shrugged. According to the Americans with Disabilities Act, these are some invisible disabilities: autism, epilepsy, major depressive disorder, bipolar disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, and schizophrenia. Many libraries try to accommodate patrons with disabilities. We do this very well. However, there are less libraries that try to accommodate staff with disabilities. The main reason why Emily is against disclosure is that there's a stigma on mental illness. People use derogatory names like crazy and loony. I realize that auditory hallucinations may seem crazy to you. However, to people like Emily, they are a real thing. Luckily, there's medication that helps with hallucinations to the point that people with such problems can live normal lives. According to Deepak and Purves, diversity in the workforce covers, quote, attitudes, lifestyles, generational cohorts, disabilities, and sexual preferences. Because mental illness is considered a type of disability, it fits into this definition. Many organizations have widened the definition of diversity to include equity and inclusion. According to Brescian's study, multiple participants explained that at times there was confusion among committee members, library colleagues, and even library leadership about what populations should be targeted by EDI efforts. Should mental illness be targeted? That's the big question. Accommodations. In many institutions, there are American with Disability Act centers that help people with disabilities. By requesting accommodations, people with mental illnesses can work in more comfortable environments so that they can excel as their other colleagues do. For example, Emily has been working on getting alternative work hours so that she can beat rush hour traffic, which is a trigger for her illness. She filled out a form and must ask her doctor to fill out another form in order to get this accommodation. As I was researching this topic and speaking to people like Emily, I started thinking what libraries can do. Stigma of mental illness is larger than libraries. It's everywhere. But libraries, based on Emily's experience and my experience with my colleague who had autism, and I'm sure numerous other experiences, are also have that stigma. Why does Emily decide not to disclose her illness? If you had a visible handicap, disability, you would disclose your illness. However, people with invisible disabilities sometimes don't. So I thought one way that we could conquer some of this, maybe conquer is too big of a word, but to help with stigma in libraries is to work on diversity plans. And the first thing I think we should do is I don't think we should put mental illness under the word disabilities. Like I talked about, there's two types of disabilities. And when people think of disabilities, they think of visible disabilities, not invisible disabilities. So I don't think mental illness has a place under disabilities. You could add mental illness to the plan. So those two words that the diversity in this library supports people with mental illness. And I realized that the words mental illness can be derogatory for some people. There's other terms that people use, and I don't find anything wrong with mental illness, but there are also other terms to use. And you could just put those in the plans and it'll be in black and white. Or you could use invisible disabilities to fight stigma. That before I started researching this topic, I didn't know what an invisible disability was. So I learned, and what worries me if you put invisible disabilities in diversity plans, maybe people won't understand what you're trying to say. So that's why I personally think adding mental illness to diversity plans would be a good way. But there's plenty of other ways too. And so I thought I would open up the conversation here and hear what you all think. If you've had any experiences or any ideas of how to help fight the stigma of mental illness in libraries, that would be great.
Thank you, Jacqueline. If anyone has a questions, feel free to put that in the questions and answer box, or raise your hand if you would like to unmute yourself.
I did see one hand came up briefly in the participants. It doesn't seem to stay up.
Well, I can tell you, I listed my references at the back of the conversation, and I wanted to bring up that there's this really excellent book that I discovered called LIS Interrupted: Intersections of Mental Illness and Library Work. And it's a really interesting book. It's a book of essays written by people with mental illness working in libraries and their experiences. And they're disclosing if they're writing an essay in the book, so that's not really an issue, but they just talked about their experiences in libraries. And I totally recommend this book if you're interested in the topic.
All right, we have some conversation in the chat. The question is, as a supervisor, I am aware of things like employee assistance program. While I believe strongly in referring people to that, I always struggle with how to do so. One person said it just treat it like it is not a big thing. What do others do with this?
So with this question, you'd like to refer someone to the employee. Wait a minute.
I think the question is not sure how to approach this in a very effective and efficient manner.
Yeah, that's difficult because you may not get any information from the person if the person decides not to disclose. But if you just said, I realize you're struggling or something like that, and here's this program that the university provides, that may help you, that I don't find people would find, I think, that helpful. I think people with mental illness wants to be respected, and doing it that way, you would be respecting that person and helping them as well.
Yeah, and there's also the comment about one of the participants heard from Variety colleagues that remote work options are a huge help for people managing mental illness. And
Yeah, I totally agree. At Florida International University, we can work from home 2 days, and that really helps Emily because one of her triggers is rush hour traffic. So she has 2 days where she doesn't have to worry about it. And her dean also allows her extra if she's having a bad day or something like that, she can work from home. So I think definitely it's really helpful, especially when you're going through a trigger and you're like Emily having hallucinations. It's definitely better to be home with her medication and she can work from home effectively.
and another comment is, any thoughts about approaching this from the paradigm of neurodiversity?
I don't know what neurodiversity is. Could you explain a little bit more?
Mm, Laurel, who asked the questions, if you're willing to chat that.
I'm sorry, I think I do know what neurodiversity is, but I just to clarify, make sure I because I know one way of talking about mental illness is using the word neurodivergent. So I do know that.
Okay. While we wait, this is another questions. Do you think a social anxiety will be considered as an invisible disability?
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Compulsive anxiety disorder is a real thing. And I've read that it's because of our lifestyle. It's becoming anxiety is a really, really big thing.
Mhm.
Definitely.
So another question is, as someone who has disclosed her disabilities, I do not know. My institution has been very good about supporting me like other employees. However, nothing was done per se positively. Oh, so I think it's more like a comment.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. So it's probably a comment about the library is probably very supportive, but they do not do anything very specific about it, which is probably a common thing.
Yeah, I think so. I keep on hoping that Emily's experience at the small academic library is just doesn't happen in most libraries. Um, I don't know.
This is Diana. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, hi
Yes.
Diana.
Hi. I see that Natalie has her hand raised. Can I give her the option to speak if she'd like?
That would be great, Natalie.
Natalie, I'm going to allow you to talk if you want to. If you don't want to speak, just to tell us to pass. All right, you're unmuted.
I think she's still muted.
She is. I just clicked ask to unmute.
Okay, there she goes. Okay.
Are you there, Natalie?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. There's way too many options to unmute. Um, yeah, I have personal experience with this and also experience with close family members. And part of my take, well, I mean, there's a lot of issues at work here. It's really, really hard to obtain a position anywhere you go. So trying to bring anything to light that might make you seem different, even in a more open world like a library environment, I think can put a target on your back. And I do know of somebody who has special accommodations, but is talked about because it isn't understood. So, I think a big part of the issue here is that it's a broader societal issue and there needs to be a lot more education. I like that they've been advertising for more pro mental illness type things, but in a lot of well, the specific cases are a profit driven market. A specific sign up for this service and you get to pay a monthly fee to go talk to somebody. So I'm really appreciative that you're having this discussion. I think there needs to be a lot more, and yeah, that's as much as I've got now.
I agree, Natalie. Thank you for bringing this up. It's it's very common. Emily, for example, struggles with it almost daily, and it does if you disclose what happened to her in a smaller university, you lose your job, and then people you like if you have accommodations, people start talking, and it is very difficult, and it is a conversation for a larger amount of people. Have you ever heard of the place NAMI, the National Association of Mental Illness? NAMI does a really great job of spreading the word about people with mental illness, and they also have really great support groups and things like that as well.
Well, it definitely depends too on the state that you live in.
Yeah, that's true.
And a lot of the services aren't there for say southern states, certain southern states. I'll leave it at
Live in
that.
Florida.
Oh, yeah. I wasn't speaking of that one, but yes, I've lived there as well. Yeah, it's great though. I do appreciate you bringing this up.
But thank you for your comment. I appreciate that.
So go back to the query about approaching this paradigm of neurodiversity, and the person explained it. Neurodiversity is the idea that people's brains work in different patterns, and we should accommodate and accept differences from the norm.
Yes.
And then the idea that there is one normal or healthy type of brain or mind, or one right style of neurocognitive functioning in a culturally constructed fiction.
That sounds lovely. I just we need to get the word out about these things and talk about it. That's why I recommend this book. If I know I'm just talking about libraries and it's a larger issue, but the Dubin Wade book is definitely something to read if you're interested in the topic.
Yeah, I just found out that we actually subscribed the electronic version of this book. So thank you for recommending that.
It's Diana again. I see we have a couple more hands raised. Can I pass the baton?
Yeah, go ahead. Thank you, Diane. Susan?
Oh, okay.
ahead.
Yeah. I apologize for being late to the presentation, but I think the topic, and based on the discussion that we've had so far, that again, it's an education and awareness situation maybe right now, that, you know, if you were a supervisor, you know, you're potentially been exposed to, you know, people with certain physical or visible disabilities, that, you know, you have precedent or you have guidance. I don't think that, you know, supervisors would have as much guidance about any sort of mental illness or whatever terms are appropriate to describe that. So I think this is a great idea to, you know, incorporate it more, because I'm thinking that, you know, when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, I'm not sure that, again, the different ways our brains work is considered in that calculation. You know, we talk about different learning styles, but we don't necessarily, again, think about how we approach our work and trying to allow people, you know, the freedom and opportunity to work in the ways that are best for them. So I think this is a great topic, and I hope that there will be more discussion and more guidance for especially people who are managers, but also the employee, like how you approach asking, because as other people have said, if you disclose or you ask, you know, it should be confidential, but we know how the grapevine works. Unfortunately, as someone mentioned before, they were accommodated, but everybody talked about them in that, like, you know, they're not holding up their end of the work, and that is the last thing that one wants, especially if you want a healthy workplace, as we were hearing about yesterday during the opening vision speaker. So there's a lot, but I think, again, in the chat, there's lots of great comments about, you know, again, empathy. I really thought empathy was going to be a permanent part of our lives after the pandemic, but it didn't seem to take long for that to change. So that's a lot of rambling on, but I do I appreciate this, and I checked, and my library does not own the LIS interrupted book, so I definitely will be putting in a request for that.
Yes, my library doesn't either. I had to get it through ILL, and it's expensive. It's like $57. So so I put in a request for my library too.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a very good resource for the library. I have another hand raised from Kathy. Go ahead, Kathy.
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to say that I'm in a very fortunate position at my library where we do have a pretty neurodiverse staff. So I have ADHD and anxiety, and I'm super, super open about it at work, both with, my coworkers and my student worker employees. I always tell them, when I have a new student worker starting, like, listen, I have super terrible ADHD. So if I'm explaining something and I'm talking too fast or it doesn't make sense, like, please just stop me and say, hey, can you explain that again? Just different things like that. And I've found um, that being really upfront about it and honest about it, um, I think in my particular library, um, makes kind of a positive difference, which has not always been my experience. But it is possible to be super open about it and have it be a positive thing. There's other staff members at my particular library that are also open. One of my coworkers has really bad PTSD, and she's also very open about it. And sometimes she has to take chunks of time off of work, but because we know that, okay, she's having a hard time, something must be going on, I think it fosters this empathy that, okay, she needs these accommodations, I need certain accommodations. Like, I think there are rare instances where it can be, it can foster empathy in your coworkers and your students and stuff. Um, I have faced some discrimination in the past about it, but I still try to be like super open about it all the time because I personally, that's my little way to try to fight against the stigma that, like, I'm a solid worker, I get all my stuff done, I'm reliable. I may, need accommodations for things once in a while, but I try to just be really, really honest about it all the time. And it's actually helped with a couple of my student workers too. They've turned around and been like, yeah, I have really bad depression. I'm struggling. I'm not gonna be able to make it in today. And it helps me as a supervisor too, to be like, to understand what's going on and that they're not just like blowing off a work shift or whatever. Like, I can understand, gives me a larger understanding into what's going on with them. And then I can say, like, hey, if you want to come in a different day when you're having a better day and make up some hours, go for it. I try to, knowing that makes me a little bit more flexible as a supervisor as well.
That's true. You have a
Mhm.
great experience. That's great, Katie.
Yeah. I know, and I know I'm super, super lucky, but because that I know it's not the case everywhere, but that, and maybe there's people that at my workplace that think I'm super nuts, but like, that's not my business. And it's not going to stop me from being really, really open about it. I think it's important I just personally think it's important to try to do that if you can.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
Not,
agree with you.
yeah, yeah.
It's just my friend
thank you.
Emily, she just had a different experience where now she's kind of scared.
Mhm. Oh yeah, and I totally understand. Like, I've definitely been in positions like that, at past jobs and things where, it was not as empathetic and it wasn't as supportive. Um, and there have been times when in the past where I wasn't as open about it, but but this experience at my library now has really been so positive.
Thank you, Kathy, for sharing.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it.
That's great, Katie.
Mhm.
I have a couple more questions. During a candidate interview, some of the committee feedback was flagged as potentially targeting neurodivergent traits. How would you suggest raising this with the committee in a way that encourage more inclusive, mindful feedback, especially without assuming neurodivergence?
Well, so if I understand this question, during an interview, someone who's neurodivergent was a candidate, and you would like to know how you should treat the candidate. Is that the question?
More like typically like a candidate doing presentation, and then people come to the presentation and give a feedback survey to the search committee. And then when the feedback basically said, I think this candidate has a neurodivergent traits.
Okay. Then how would you respond to that? I would say that neurodiversity brings something to the library, something positive. I like the way Susan talked about empathy, and Katie mentioned it too. To treat these people with empathy, and a lot of really creative people are neurodivergent, and they may need more accommodations, but they're able to do the work just as well as someone who isn't. I would say something like that.
Mhm. Thank you. Another questions. Do you know of other type of accommodation that could be widely adopted for those with invisible disabilities? So thinking about remote work, etc. When we adopt broad accommodation, it can help to not force folk to have to disclose.
Well, I don't see.
It's in the chat.
Yeah.
Right. So one accommodation probably like remote work. Somebody was in that. Is there any other way to accommodate that besides remote work?
Well, like Emily, she one of her triggers that triggers the voices in her head, they is rush hour traffic. So she gets to work at 5:30 in the morning before rush hour traffic, and she leaves at 2 o'clock in the afternoon before rush hour traffic. And that's an accommodation that works really well for her, because that trigger goes away, because at 2 o'clock in the afternoon the schools are not even out, but she's already done her 8 hours. And so that's another accommodation that I know of. And loud noises could be triggers. Sometimes I have my own office, but and Emily does too. So sometimes just closing the door when things get loud. I know last week there was a birthday party, and Emily was telling me that the singing triggered her, and so she just closed her door, and simple things like that would help. It depends on the trigger, what kind of accommodation you would request.
Yeah, good point. Because I have problem with noise too. So actually, I get requests and assign and an office is just far away from the main central area, and I get to work in silence, so to speak. So
That's good.
that's the kind of accommodation that I appreciate I can have. And this is more about the common. As a person with bipolar disorder, I can say that remote working has been a godsend. In my prior positions, I had to use FMLA, but it was very obvious to people that I was absent. Now, when I'm having a bad days, I can continue to work since I can stay home. I have disclosed to my supervisor, however, I don't talk about it mainly because of the past stigma that is hard to forget.
Yeah, remote working is really a good situation if you can do that when you're not feeling very well.
Yeah, it's very popular.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments from attendees? So, do you know of any resource or workshop that might be available for managers to help the employee?
It's a really good question. I do not know. I'm sure at FIU we have an employee assistance program, and I've gone to them before asking them how to relate with someone I supervise. So maybe your university or library has such a program that you could talk to them, ask them how to ask a trained psychologist how to react, what to do. I know it's been really helpful for me with especially with one particular person I supervise, and we get along really well now.
That's a good suggestion. Thank you.
Yeah, I just saw Beth's comment about supervisory trainings addressing mental as well as physical disabilities. I'm a supervisor, but I've never had training for it where I am now, so I can't answer that. But that's a really great idea. That would be a really great way to fight the stigma, is to teach supervisors how to how to how to um how to treat neurodivergent people, and so everyone's happy.
That's good. I think I see Natalie is raised hand. You still have questions?
Well, I just wanted to ask, yeah, I wanted to ask if what you were considering doing with this discussion topic, if you were planning on taking it any further.
Well, I think in 2019 there was an extensive survey done about mental illness in libraries, and it was fascinating read. I didn't use it for anything I did in this presentation, and I can't tell you right now the authors' names, but they did a really fascinating thing, and I'm thinking about doing a new one because it's been 6 years, and we went through the pandemic, and things probably have changed since 2019. So that's what I'd like to do this summer. It's one of my projects that once we get through fiscal close, I want to start working on. So that's where I'm going to take this.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Have about 5 minutes left. Any other questions or comments? This is excellent topic.
Yeah, I'm really excited. Thank you for all your questions and comments. I really appreciate that. It's something that we don't talk enough about. I think talking more about it is what we need to do.
Yeah, at my work we have a group that dealing and actually working on and addressing wellness. We call it employee wellness, health wellness. So I probably can bring this one back to them about the topic. And I think what we talk about is just employee as a general. But the questions about supervisors, how to help supervisors to help the staff is probably something we have not discussed that. So
Yeah, I agree with you. That needs to be discussed more.
I'm going to put a couple more minutes if there are any other people want to type questions in the chat.
Ooh, I think she let me turn back my audio. So I was just saying that as a follow-up, you know, we should someone's should explore a proposal for next year's conference, perhaps on you know, as a supervisor, or here's, if you aspire to be that, here are some things, you know, the empathy, flexible schedules, you know, how to approach, you know, making the workplace, you know, successful and comfortable and welcoming for everybody, regardless of what it is. So keep that in mind as people are putting lots of good ideas into the chat.
Absolutely. Thank you, Susan.
And probably supervisors, current supervisors, or a newly appointed supervisors can also bring that one up in a training session, or probably just like, hey, I need to train on this.
Definitely.
Any other questions? We have about 4 minutes left.
I see someone, Heather, put in a link about a lit review. That is a really good one. From 2023. That's a good one if you're interested in what's been written. Surprisingly, not much has been written. Probably less than 10 articles I could find.
So, Jacqueline, if someone wants to contact you for further questions, how do we contact you? Do you have any contact information willing to share?
I guess I could give my email address. It's JRADEBAU at fiu.edu.
Mm. JRADE. That's the one.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you, Auntie.
Thank you. Well, thank you everyone for coming, and thank you so much, Jacqueline, for your presentation. This is excellent and definitely is needed for, especially this time of period of situation happening right now. So the next session is going to be at, let's see, looking at the coordinate, we're going to have a break. Oh no, a 2:45 on in-resource license explaining. And then so we have about 15 minutes break and then come back again at 2:45, the next session.
Well, thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.